Hello, Mystic Rob here. I had an interesting experience. It brought a lot of ideas to mind, and I thought, let's just jump and make a video on it. Anyone who follows me, as far as my friends and whatnot, know that I've been playing this game called Skyrim. And tonight I had a mission in it, and it had to do with being in the Fighters Guild. And at any rate, after you finish this mission, you come around and everybody in the Fighters Guild stands there, and there's a presentation, and the guy that you went out on this mission with gives testimony of your bravery and his fealty to you as a warrior and all that kind of thing. And I just couldn't I just really had this sensation as I sat there watching the scene that this is really what part of manhood is. And sadly, we've lost so much of that in our culture. There's been this de-manning, so to speak. This idea that, well, let's just go back to basics, okay? The culture has become so feminized. Not that that is totally a bad thing. There are elements of the feminine that are important. But if you've ever studied religion, comparative religion, sociology, the differences between the sexes, you'll realize that women are literally the vessel of life. You know, we all pass through them to get here, and that life basically is what their essence is. So what does that make the essence of a man? The essence of a man is that he is a killer. You can't get around that. Society wants to deny that, culture wants to deny that, but no, men are violent killers. That's what we are. That's just as a woman is the progenitor of life in her very being. Men are the instruments of death at their very being. And to ignore that is to ignore our heritage. Now, does that mean that men should engage in killing ruthlessly? Well, there are a lot of other things as we've evolved as a culture that go with being a man. For example, judgment, discretion. A real man knows when to draw the sword and when not to. So, this idea that rather than have a culture, and because there's a lot of powers that want to control society, the idea that there's a culture that would satisfy that need in men in a real way, it goes against the control mechanisms in society. So what do we have? We have an incredibly feminized society, one in which men aren't allowed to engage in those things that make men men. We have poor substitutes. The military and what they say, being in the military is. We don't have rites of passage. The closest thing we have to a rite of passage for a young man is a driver's license or maybe his first piece of ass, something silly like that. And so, what this really brought to mind to me, because when I was in the military, one of the things the military did get right was that when you achieved rank, you were brought out in front of the entire, well, not platoon, it would be the company. You were brought in front of the entire company. The guy who ran the company stood there. The guy, and they called you out. You stood there, and you were presented with whatever achievement you made. If it was a new medal, new rank, what have you. And when I was watching this thing in Skyrim, it kind of reminded me of that when I was in the military. And that's what's missing in our culture, because as, when I've watched a lot of these seminars on being a man and what manhood is and what is missing from manhood, And one of the things that was interesting is that how most men earn their living today, you're a worm. You basically have to go to work. There's some boss that, it's all an ego-driven environment in most situations. And it doesn't matter what you're like at work. Even if you're a powerful person at work, there's a disconnect between the home life and how you earn your living. There used to be this idea that that when we lived in small villages of 1 to 200 people, everybody knew who everybody was, and anyone who made an achievement, word got around. If there was a dam that needed built, and you were somebody who were not necessarily of high ranking, but you showed up every day early, and you were the last to leave, and you made a real effort to see that this dam was built, for example, because it was important to you, word got around. And those elements of work, what happened was somehow we went from, this idea of working hard and having your place in the tribe moved to having your place in the village. But today, we don't have villages. All we have are income. And the media has sold us on this idea that it's all about what you can get out of your present situation. So, not only does our culture not allow men to be men, if there were a real man to stand forthright in our culture, no one would recognize him. So, I often make these arguments about what real men are, what being a real man is about, and that I feel to really get in touch with yourself as a man, you should at some point in your life study a martial art. You should at some point understand that it's your role to enact violence. But you should also understand that it's your role to know when it is appropriate and when not to. So, like I say, I just wanted to have my little diatribe about this. And, I by no means have, covered all the bases with this. But it's sad that our society has left this behind. And I really hope that maybe in the awakening, maybe in what's to come, there'll be a renewal of this, because it's easy for women, if they so desire, to get back to their roots. All they have to do is, I don't know, join some kind of clubbing, that engages in that. I mean, for women, it's part of their biology, and I could go at length about that, for better or worse. With men, it's very much not about your biology and what happens to you. For women, their biology just makes them a woman in a certain context, and then they have to deal with that on their terms, and whether they're honorable in that is dependent upon how they react to it and the education that they've had and the people around them. But for men, it's much different. There's no one thing that happens to a boy that causes him to become a man. And without that identifier, it's not as easy a transition. And because our culture has really squelched, really put the screws to men asserting themselves as men, then there are a lot of boys in men's bodies out there, and there are a lot of proto-men out there wanting to learn to be real men who don't know how. And that's pretty much the state of our culture. And I really believe that if this men's movement that I had such high hopes for, I don't see advancing the way it needs to be. So, but I just I saw this in the game, and if that's, and by the way, that's why geeks and the guys who are beat up in high school and are bullied, that's why they turn to things like Dungeons and Dragons and these kinds of things. There is this need deep inside to act that out somehow. And, you look at the high schools and the ones who are, on the football team are doing this or that. Those are kind of false versions of it. And even playing Dungeons and Dragons, although, it's a false version of it, it is showing a desire for that. In the perfect world, I feel, at the age of 14, every young man or boy, 14, it's hard, to call them young men, would take a course in martial arts, or in swordsmanship, or in hand-to-hand combat, and be taught the honor and discretion that goes with that. And if we had that as a requirement, you would see such a massive change in culture. But then again, we live in a panty-waist, pussified culture that says, no, you can't do that. Everybody's got to be turned into a woman. So hopefully, I don't really, I know this will get a lot of negative comments, and there'll be a lot of panty-waist, people out there who think that I'm just trying to be tough or whatever. The truth of the matter is, our culture is out of balance, and what it lacks are strong men who understand their power and who are willing to make a stand for what's right. If we had that, society would be transformed. Men could go back to being men, and women could go back to being women. And I think that's what this world needs. Peace.